In this lesson, we'll look at reference that will help guide us in creating the run cycle, and we'll also create the initial pose. Alright, so what we'll do first is take a look at that reference. And here it is. So if you've ever worked on a walk cycle, you'll notice some similarities here in that we have contact positions, we have down positions, passing and peak points. So that will help us again to figure out what will need to be posed in order to create a realistic run. Now the exciting part is we really only need a few extreme poses and a few breakdowns, and everything else will be polished in between. So that's going to be exciting because we can get our run cycle done much faster that way. Okay, so let's keep this in mind and jump right back into 3ds Max. Okay, so getting started, we'll check a few things. Let's go ahead and head over to our playback controls. We'll go ahead and right click one of our icons here so we can take a look at our time configuration dialog. I'm using film 24 frames per second. You can take a look at the start and end time here, which is great because this is going to give us a nice midpoint, which is going to be frame 8. Essentially how this works is if we were to knock off the last frame here, to be 1 to 14, so that would make the midpoint 7, but then since we have 15, we now have an even midpoint of 8. So when it comes to creating our breakdown poses, we'll be able to place them in between our extremes and get something that looks nice and fluid. Alright, and from there I'll choose OK. Taking a look at the default tangent type, I'm using auto so we can create smooth interpolation. Let's go ahead and grab our controls. We'll enable auto keys so we can speed up the time it takes to create our keyframes. And what we're going to do is create a keyframe for every control on frame 1. Eventually we'll want to clone frame 1 to the last frame 15. Again, this helps us to achieve a seamless cycle. But once we've assured that all parameters have been locked down, that will help us to prevent any discrepancies in our run where we might notice popping after we apply cycling to this animation. So we just want to be on the safe side and make sure everything's locked down. So on frame 1, before we go ahead and set our key, we'll check our key filters. Take a look here. I have position, rotation, and custom parameters active. That's all we need here. So we can now close this out and use the big key button to set a key on frame 1, and now we are ready to get started with our poses. We've already explained this, but just to keep in mind the coordinate systems we're using: gimbal for rotation and parent mode for our move tool. Again, so that as we animate, we know exactly what axis is being modified. Alright, let's say we get right to work. So grabbing the center of gravity, we'll go ahead and bring this down. What we're doing is posing our extreme, which is the passing position. And then once we have added the extremes, we can then work on our breakdown, which will be the down position. And again, everything else will be an in-between. Alright, great. So we can go ahead and kind of bring the leg back. I'll bring the center of gravity down just a little bit more. Since that right leg is moving back, we'll want to grab our that out. And what we're doing is working on the animation one layer at a time so it's not overwhelming. So after we have created our extremes, then it'll be a matter of focusing on the legs and then the upper torso and then the arms. I find things get done much faster if we have a game plan. Great, so I'll go ahead and bring the right leg back a bit more. What we want to do is make sure that it looks extended, but it has a slight bend so we can prevent IK popping. Let's go to the left leg. We'll go ahead and bring that up, and then we'll rotate the foot down. And as we're posing, we should think about exaggeration. We don't want to get too far with exaggeration at all, but we need to loosen up our characters a bit with exaggeration so that our animations don't look so rigid. I'll grab the knee controls and let's go ahead and bring those forward in the Z and Y axes. That way we can avoid flipping in the legs, which is never good. Okay, so I think that this pose is going to work out. Let's go ahead and move up the body. So with the right leg back, the right arm should move forward. It seems pretty basic, but it's a common issue to pose the arms the wrong way. It's just an accident sometimes, but it's pretty funny. But not if you've spent so much time on your cycle and you have to go back and reverse the arms. But thankfully we have some cool tools in 3ds Max that we can use to reverse animations and get exactly what we'd like to see. I'm actually going to go ahead and show you how to reverse an animation so that we can do things like finish the arms much faster. That's going to be a really cool technique we'll learn a bit later on in the tutorial. Now, thinking about the arms, since this is more of a standard run, they're not going to swing too much at all. If you're working on a sprint, maybe you'd have more arm sway, but for just a standard run, you're not going to have too much of that. Or if you're working on a more stylized animation. So with that in mind, I'm just going to go ahead and pose the arm forward on frame 1 here at about this angle. Great. So the same thing goes for the left arm when it moves back. It's going to move back a little bit more than it moves forward. But again, we don't want it to rotate back too much. All right, great. I might go ahead and bring up the left shoulder just a bit more. All right, so this is getting there. Let's go back to the center of gravity and we'll lean the character forward. Remember, a run is a series of falling off balance and regaining balance as a walk. And since the character is moving forward, we want to make sure that his body is leaned forward, but not too much. Again, we'd exaggerate it for more stylized animations, but the body naturally won't rotate too far forward. All right, great. So I'd say our runner here has great posture. Let's go to the chest control, and we'll also rotate that forward, the x-axis. For the head control, let's go ahead and rotate that up. That's going to work out well. Great. So our pose is looking really nice. Let's take a look here just to make sure that there's nothing else we'd like to tweak as far as the body is concerned. I'm looking at the twist of the upper torso. I might just go ahead and twist that just a little bit more in the z-axis, so we can notice the movement. And then we'll go ahead and take care of the arms by just rotating them out slightly. Great. For the head control, I'll go ahead and rotate that up a bit more. And rotate the head and the z-axis to straighten it up a bit, so the runner's looking forward. And now the last thing we need to do for this pose is go ahead and pose the fingers. So this is actually pretty quick to do. We'll just go ahead and select from the index to the pinky, rotate those in. And then you'll notice we have custom parameters that we can access from the modify panel. So go ahead and bring in the mid and end sections. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. We'll go to each finger, just kind of rotate down. And our fingers do not need to match at all. It's not a big deal, so we don't have to copy the pose after we're done posing the fingers here. They're barely noticeable in the run, so again, we don't have to spend the time to make sure there's symmetry in the hand. So I'll just go in, take the pinky, kind of curl that in. And a lot of times in animation, we want to aim for asymmetry. But when it comes to cycles, for the most part, we want to make sure that there is symmetry between each pose that we go through, because that just gives us a nice, clean, and polished cycle. Unless, of course, we need to create a cycle with asymmetry purposely. All right, so we'll just go ahead and adjust the thumb here, and I think that looks great. All right, so what we'll do is go ahead and take care of the left hand, and I'll pause the video. And we're back, so take a look. Here is our pose. All right, so let's say we go ahead and finish up this lesson. We'll grab all of our controls. Let's head over to frame 1. On our track bar, we'll hold down shift and we'll drag the key from 1 to 15. All right, so now we have locked in our range. Perfect. So in the next lesson, we're ready to pose our next extreme on frame 8 of this very same pose here, but flipped. So we'll learn how to take care of that.